What if I told you that email and the carrier pigeon are solving the exact same design problem: trust, routing, and delivery confirmation, and that if you understand how 19th century pigeon fanciers solved it, you'll understand why your email sometimes lands in spam. Two systems, separated by 150 years, built on the same three rules. If you had to get a secret message to a friend 100 miles away, with no phones, no cars, and someone actively trying to stop you, what would you build? Sit with that for a second. Now picture Paris, in September of 1870. Prussian soldiers have surrounded the city. On September 19th, they cut every telegraph wire leading in and out. 2 million people are suddenly sealed off from the rest of the world, with no way to send or receive a single message. The problem those Parisians faced wasn't really about wires or birds or paper. It was something older and simpler. How do you get information across a distance you cannot personally cross, and trust that it arrives whole, reaches the right person, and stays hidden from the wrong one? That question has shaped empires, wars, and economies. Armies won or lost based on how fast orders could travel. Markets rose and fell on which trader heard the news first. And today, the same question still runs underneath almost everything we do, just compressed into milliseconds instead of days. Because any system built to move a message has to solve three problems at once. It has to know where the message is going. It has to prove the message wasn't changed along the way. And it has to keep the wrong person from ever reading it. Miss one of those, and the whole system breaks. Here is what people actually built when this exact scenario became real. The homing pigeon isn't just a bird with a good sense of direction. It became, for over 2,000 years, the backbone of an entire messaging system. The bird's ability to find its way home functioned as a routing protocol. The message itself, rolled tightly and tied to a leg or a tail feather, was the payload. And the network of lofts scattered across a region was the infrastructure that made the whole thing work. This wasn't new in 1870. Pigeon messaging traces back to ancient Persia, where rulers used birds to move information across their territory. Julius Caesar reportedly used pigeons during his campaigns in Gaul. Ancient Greek athletes sent word of their Olympic victories home the same way. By the time Paris was under siege, this was a mature system with thousands of years of refinement behind it. But the siege pushed that system to its limit. With the telegraph wires cut, Parisians turned to balloons to smuggle pigeons out of the city, so the birds could later be released and fly back home, straight through Prussian lines. Over the course of the siege, this network carried roughly 115,000 official government communications and close to 1 million private messages between families and loved ones. The real innovation came from a photographer named René Degren. He developed a way to shrink written messages down using microphotography, compressing entire pages onto tiny strips of film. A single pigeon could now carry up to 20 of these microfilmed messages at once, packed into a small capsule. What looked like a bird carrying a slip of paper was actually a compression and encoding system, built to move as much information as possible per flight. The Prussians weren't blind to any of this. They understood exactly what those birds were carrying, so they trained hawks specifically to hunt the pigeons out of the sky before they could reach the city. That's an interception threat, built by one side to defeat the messaging system of the other. So Pigeon Post wasn't a quaint fallback option. It was a full engineered system, with routing built into the bird's biology, redundancy through sending multiple birds with the same message, encoding through Degren's microfilm, and an active arms race against interception. Militaries and news organizations kept relying on it for another 80 years after the siege ended. Which raises a real question. If this system worked well enough to survive into the 20th century, what actually replaced it? Not the bird itself, but the problem the bird was built to solve. Now watch someone solve the exact same three problems, but with light instead of feathers. In 1971, an engineer named Ray Tomlinson sent the first message over ARPANET, the early network that would eventually grow into the internet. Tomlinson needed a way to separate a person's name from the location of the computer they were using, so a message could be routed to the right machine and the right user on that machine. His solution was the @ symbol. That one character solved the same routing problem a homing pigeon's instinct had solved for centuries, just written in a different language. For the next decade, email systems ran on inconsistent, informal methods, with no shared standard for how messages should move between different networks. That changed in 1982, when the Simple Mail Transfer Protocol, or SMTP, was formally defined. SMTP gave every email system a common set of rules for how a message should be labeled, addressed, and passed along. This was the verification and delivery layer, the modern equivalent of a trusted loft network that everyone agreed to use the same way. The way email actually moves is where the comparison gets interesting. An email doesn't travel in one straight line from sender to recipient. It hops. It passes through a mail server, gets checked and forwarded, moves to a domain name system that looks up where the recipient's mailbox actually lives, and then continues through possibly several more servers before it lands. This is a store and forward system, structurally similar to a message being handed from one pigeon loft to another loft closer to its destination, except it happens in a fraction of a second instead of over hours or days. That relay structure is also where email's version of the hawk shows up. Just as Prussian forces trained hawks to intercept pigeons, modern systems face a constant stream of spam and phishing attempts, messages designed to slip through the routing system disguised as something legitimate. The tools are completely different. The underlying threat is not. So email isn't really a new invention in the way it's often described. It's a resolving of the same three problems Pigeon Post faced: routing, verification, and interception, just executed at a scale and speed that would have been unimaginable to anyone standing in Paris in 1870. Two systems, separated by roughly a century, built to answer the same question. Now it's worth putting them side by side and seeing exactly where they match and where they genuinely don't. Strip both systems down to their bare mechanics, and something interesting happens. A sender has a message. That message enters a routing layer, which decides where it needs to go. It moves through some form of transit. It gets verified as authentic on arrival, and it reaches a recipient. That five-stage skeleton describes a pigeon flying out of a besieged city in 1870, and it describes an email leaving a server today. The materials are completely different. The underlying diagram is the same. Look closer, and the similarities go beyond just structure. Both systems relied on decentralized relay networks instead of a single point-to-point path. A pigeon loft network spread the risk across many birds and many stations, so losing one bird didn't mean losing the message. Email spreads messages across multiple servers for the same reason, so no single point of failure can take down the whole system. Both systems also depended on infrastructure that was, in a real sense, more valuable than any individual message passing through it. The loft network mattered more than any one letter. The server and protocol network matters more than any one email. And in both cases, the earliest and most serious adopters were the people with the most urgent need for reliable long-distance trust. Reuters, the news organization, used a fleet of 45 homing pigeons to move stock prices between Brussels and Aachen before telegraph lines could handle the job. Militaries in both centuries built their command structures around whichever messaging system was fastest and most reliable at the time. But the systems split apart in ways that matter. A pigeon can only fly to one place, its home. There's no equivalent of typing in a new address and sending a message anywhere in the world instantly. Email erased that limitation entirely. You can reach nearly anyone, anywhere, at almost no cost, in seconds. That's not a small improvement. It's a completely different category of capability. At the same time, something was lost. When a pigeon was captured or shot down, that failure was visible. Someone knew the message hadn't arrived. Email doesn't work that way. A message can be copied, redirected, or spoofed without the sender or recipient ever knowing something went wrong. The interception risk didn't disappear when the technology improved. It became invisible. That's worth sitting with, because it means progress here wasn't a clean upgrade from worse to better. It was a trade. One set of vulnerabilities was exchanged for a different set. That trade points to something bigger than either pigeons or email. Every messaging system in history, whether it moves by wing, by wire, or by fiber optic cable, has been forced into the same three-way negotiation between speed, security, and reach. No system has ever maximized all three at once. Pigeon Post was reasonably secure and could reach long distances, but it was slow and could only carry small amounts of information at a time. The telegraph, when it worked, was fast and could reach far, but it was expensive and easy to physically cut. Exactly what happened in Paris. Email is fast, cheap, and can reach almost anyone on the planet. But its default security is weak enough that entire industries now exist just to patch that gap. New technology doesn't dissolve this trade-off. It just moves where the weak point sits. So what does a 2,000-year-old bird have to teach anyone building communication systems today? Not that old solutions were primitive, and not that new solutions are safe. The lesson is that a communication system is only ever as strong as its weakest constraint, and every generation tends to place too much trust in whichever constraint their current technology has already solved, while underestimating the one it hasn't. Paris trusted its physical infrastructure completely, right up until the moment it was severed. Modern users tend to trust digital delivery the same way, right up until a message is spoofed or intercepted without anyone noticing. The technology changes. The blind spot doesn't. So here's the question worth sitting with. We've traded pigeons for packets, but we haven't escaped the triangle. We've just moved where the weak point sits. So where do you think today's messaging systems are quietly cutting corners? Speed, security, or reach? And what do you think replaces email the same way email replaced the pigeon? Drop your guess below. I'll pin the most interesting ones.